Hello, this is Rambling, and in this video I'm going to be doing embroidery while rambling. Today I'm working on an apple inspired by the Animal Crossing apple, so with the red and yellow. So today I'm going to continue speaking on pelvic floor physical therapy. I had my second session recently, and I think I'm gonna only be doing it once a month, and maybe I'll just be doing 3 more sessions before I stop because it is quite expensive. But anyways, I had spoken in my other video that I am an anxious peer, so I'm somebody who has to go pee multiple times a day, like more than it is actually needed. So the PT actually called it double voiding. So voiding is basically when you empty your bladder or bowels, but I was double voiding / triple voiding quite frequently, and I think it's kind of due to my anxiety. But basically I would pee and then a few minutes later I would be like, oh, I feel like I didn't really get everything, and so I would go pee again, but then the second or third time I go it would be like barely anything, just like a trickle or a few drops. But after 3 weeks, I've been able to completely eliminate my double voiding habit. So basically, now when I use the restroom, I never have the instances of where it's just a trickle or kind of like a useless pee where you know that you didn't really have to go at all, but you still did. So I don't have that anymore. Now every time I go to pee, it's always a good amount, like a good volume. And I was able to do this by purposely holding my pee longer. So the PT told me to try to hold your pee for 2 to 4 hours before actually going. So for the circumstances that I would normally pee like 2 or 3 times in a row just out of caution, I would purposely not go the second and third time. If I knew I didn't drink water since the last time I peed, then I would just hold it because I know there isn't actually really anything to expel or just a very small amount. So I would purposely hold it and I wouldn't go until at least 2 to 4 hours have passed. And in the beginning, it was quite difficult, but as time has passed, the urge to pee has become less frequent. Basically, I'm able to hold it longer now without feeling like, oh my god, but what if I still have to pee? What if I still have to pee? I should pee right now. I should pee right now just in case. So now I only feel like that sort of urgency when my bladder is actually decently filled. So, and I did read that if you're able to pee for 10 seconds or more, it's kind of a good indicator to show that your bladder was indeed full. And I think the instances where I had the urge to go before the 2-hour mark was due to the fact that I was consuming too much volume of water in too short of a time. So the whole sipping versus chugging, which the PT had told me that I should be sipping water instead of chugging water, and I forgot to ask her, so I had to look it up online, but I was kind of curious as to what difference it really makes, because if you're consuming the same amount of liquid, then why does it matter if you're drinking it little bit at a time versus all at once? And I actually found an article online that talks about how the body utilizes the water and how the body distributes the water to what needs it, and then any extra water that isn't really needed is kind of flushed or dumped out. And so based on what I read, I kind of imagined that if the body were a sponge and you're chugging water, it's kind of like taking a large glass of water and dumping it directly onto the sponge in a 5-minute window frame. Then the sponge will absorb as much as it can, but a lot of the water, the excess water, is going to not be absorbed and just pour out of the sponge or pool around the sponge. Versus if you're sipping water, it's like getting that same giant glass of water and you're just pouring a little bit at a time. So let's say you're doing like 50 milliliters every 30 minutes. Then yes, you'll be consuming the same amount of water, but the sponge is able to absorb it better because there's that time that allows the sponge to kind of recover or dry up, I guess. So just like the sponge, if you're chugging water, you'll probably have to go pee frequently and sooner because your body isn't going to be using all that excess water, versus if you're sipping, your body has time to use it more adequately. At least that's how I interpreted it. I hope it makes sense and I hope I'm interpreting it correctly. But I'll link the article in case you're curious about that. But I noticed that when I'm sipping properly versus chugging, I do seem to have to use the restroom less. But if I happen to like drink a bunch of water one sitting, I usually have to go to the restroom sooner. But besides the whole sipping and chugging thing, a part of urination frequency is tied to kind of your mind and your brain's connection to your bladder. I did mention in the other video, it's about kind of retraining your bladder and the signals of when it's telling you that it's full and when it's not. During my most recent session, the PT did teach me some suppression techniques. So basically, when you feel the urge to pee, but you feel like you probably can hold it longer, then there are some things you can do to suppress that urge. And the first method she said was the famous 360 diaphragm breathing. And she was saying that the diaphragm breathing is supposed to help your body to get into the rest and digest state rather than the fight or flight state. And another method she said was counting down from 100. So distracting your mind, because sometimes thinking about having to go is what makes you want to go or makes you feel like you have to go more. And so you should try counting down from 100 to 0. Kind of like if you felt like you had to pee and then you were watching something and then the thing you were watching was so interesting you kind of forget to pee and then you don't have the urge anymore. And another method she mentioned was heel and toe raises. Basically when you kind of like, literally like when you lift your heels off the ground and then, or you could be lifting your toes off the ground. Oh, and sorry if you hear like a knocking sound, there's construction outside. But doing the heel and toe raises are supposed to help suppress the urge because she said there's like 2 nerves. I think she said there was like a S1, S2 nerve or something like that runs from your spine and then it goes through your pelvic floor muscles all the way down to your feet. And then by like, I don't know, activating that nerve or something by doing the heel and toe raises, it like does something, I don't know exactly. She said it does something that makes you want to pee less. And then the last method she told me was called the 5x5 quick flicks. And she had me practice by, like, she placed her fingers into my vagina and then she basically told me to squeeze her fingers. And then I had to squeeze her fingers 5 times in a row and then pause and then squeeze it 5 times in a row. And so when you have to use the restroom, you basically want to do those squeezing motions, like 5 sets of 5. And then I think she said it has to do with like training once again your bladder to send signals to your brain that it's not time to pee yet or something like that. I hope I'm remembering things correctly. And besides my bladder related concerns, she did take a look at the position of my cervix again, and she did say she kind of suspects that my cervix doesn't have as much mobility because of the tension in my pelvic floor. And she showed me a picture of a cervix, but it looks like a donut with some muscles sticking out of the side. So kind of imagine like a cartoon sun drawn by a child, But instead of like triangular sun rays, it would be like pasta noodles, thick pasta noodles. So imagine those pasta noodle muscles attached to your cervix, and then it attaches to your pelvic floor muscles. And if those pelvic floor muscles are too tight, then it's going to make it more difficult for the cervix to be able to move around. Because as I mentioned in the first video, the PT did mention that the cervix should be able to lift up and go back, as well as be able to come forward and come down, kind of. But because of the tension in my pelvic floor, she thinks that maybe my cervix isn't able to move around as well as it should. So she actually, to feel things around there, she did put her fingers inside, and then she kind of massaged the muscles around the cervix. She didn't massage the actual cervix itself, just the muscles that were around it. And she had me practice doing 2 kinds of pelvic floor exercises. So the first was the flower breathing thing that I didn't really understand. But she basically said it's like when you inhale, again, through your diaphragm, always through your diaphragm, and then you exhale, kind of like, you know when you have to pee very badly and then you sit on the toilet and you're kind of like, ah, and then so you're like relieved. But I think she's kind of said you exhale like that. So I did flower breathing while her fingers were still inside. And I don't know if I was doing it properly. And then the other one she had me do was a pelvic breath, where she had me once again inhale through my diaphragm. And then during the exhale, I would actually do the squeezing motion with my vagina. And then so breathe in and then exhale while squeezing. Breathe in, exhale while squeezing. And she told me that she wanted me to practice doing these at home. And she recommended that I get a dilator. So basically the dilator, it kind of looks like a dildo, but it kind of just has like a round flat platform and then like a rod coming out of the center, and it's made of silicone. And so I did look online and ordered one that was like on the cheaper side. I think I found one for like $35, but hopefully it's the right size, because there was like different size dilators. But she said that I should use the dilator to kind of measure where my cervix placement is, and then also for practicing the squeezing, the exhale squeezing motions with the dilator. And she told me to bring the dilator on the next session together, and that she'll teach me like more exercises I can do using that dilator related to my cervix, I think. But I feel like during this session, I feel like I could have learned more exercises. I kind of wish she would teach me more actionable things that I could do until my next visit. Like, I wish she could teach me like a bunch of stuff all at once, but I'll have to wait until the next session. Oh, and then I asked her, because I was kind of curious and confused about diaphragm breathing, I asked her, is diaphragm breathing something you should be like doing 24/7, or is it just something you do sometimes for specific things? And then she did say that ideally you would always kind of be breathing through your diaphragm, but you wouldn't be doing like, because when you're practicing diaphragm breathing, you're like taking really deep breaths and like, but then, you know, like if you're doing that all the time, it's not realistic. So you're breathing through the correct region, but you're not necessarily breathing like a frog. And for 360 diaphragm breathing, you should be able to feel the bottom of your ribs expanding horizontally, while also feeling your abdomen and your back expanding as well. And for some reason, I had a lot of trouble coordinating both motions at the same time, so she actually tied a TheraBand around my abdomen and then told me to like breathe so that all sides of my body is like expanding and pushing against the band, but I was having trouble. And besides telling me to practice the suppression techniques I mentioned earlier, and also doing the 2 pelvic exercises. She told me to continue doing the stretches she told me to do last time, which were happy baby pose, child's pose, and frog pose. And she just said basically I should try to incorporate stretches of the like inner thigh / groin area. Oh, and she told me to keep doing my bladder diary just to keep me accountable. And that's about all for the session that I remember. I honestly wish I could have learned more during the session, but I'll have to wait until next time. Maybe she was holding off on information because I needed a dilator for the next step, or maybe she was withholding information because, you know. But regardless, if you listened this far, thanks for listening, and I hope that this was helpful in some way. And just once again, everything I'm saying, it's just me saying what I can remember, and there's a chance that I could be remembering things incorrectly. So if you need help with your pelvic floor situation, always go to a professional. And now that's the end. Okay, bye.